Assalamualaikum and good day everyone. I am Aslima Safar and I'm going to continue the report of my partner Potri Riham about the realism, and my report is about naturalism. So naturalism is an ideology that existed from 1880s to 1940s that attempted to apply scientific principles of objectivity and detachment to its study of human beings. Also, naturalism is an outgrowth of literary realism influenced by scientific theories. It was first proposed and formulated by French novelist Émile Zola, and it was introduced to America by American novelist Frank Norris. While realism offers supposedly objective depictions of real conditions with the hope of improving society, naturalism often focuses on determinism rather, or the inability of human beings to resist the biological, social, and economic forces that dictated their behavior and their fate. It is a theory in literature emphasizing scientific observation of life without idealism or avoidance of ugly. So, moving forward for the themes of naturalism, naturalistic novels were written on themes of violence, poverty, corruption, prostitution, and others. So, naturalism is usually considered to be an outgrowth of realism in its pursuit of realistic depiction, but naturalistic fiction was more likely to depict based human influences and violence and veered away from middle class concern. So, naturalism instead, it is often depicted more marginal member of society, particularly those of low wage factor lever that was creating a more urban, regimented, unhealthy, and bleak existence for great masses of people. So naturalism was heavily influenced by theories of Charles Darwin, and naturalistic author attempted to apply scientific theories to literature. Therefore, they often took a detached and clinical tone. Naturalism often portrayed lower class characters and themes involving violence and taboo activities. So, naturalistic novels are typically pessimistic in nature. So, we have characteristic in naturalism. There are many defining characteristics of literary naturalism. Number one is naturalism in determinism. So, determinism is basically the opposite of the notion of free will. For determinism, the idea that individual characters have the direct influence on the course of their lives, and supplemented by focus on nature or fate. Human beings are living in a natural environment like animal. They can react toward the exterior and interior forces, but they are helpless before these forces. Often, a naturalistic author would lead the reader to believe that the character's fate have been predetermined, so usually by heredity and the environment factors, that the destiny of humanity is misery in life and oblivion in death, and that she or he can do nothing about it. So we also have objectivism. So objectivism, the author often try to maintain the tone rather that will be experienced as objectives. The author presents himself or herself as an object observer, similar to scientists taking note of what he or she sees. Of course, no human being can ever be truly objective, but by detaching the narrator from the story he or she tells, an author can achieve objectivity. It is also an author will sometimes achieve detachment by creating nameless characters. This puts the focus more on the plot and what happened to the character rather than the character themselves. Another characteristic is pessimism. So, in pessimism, very often one or more characters will continue to repeat one line or phrase that tend to have pessimistic connotation, sometimes emphasizing the inevitability of death, naturalistic work often include uncouth or sordid subject matter. For example, Emile Zola's work had a frankness about sexuality along with a pervasive pessimism. So, naturalistic work exposed the dark harshness of life, including poverty, racism, sex, prejudice, disease, prostitution, and fate. So another common characteristic is surprising twist at the end of the story. So equally, there tend to be a naturalistic novel and stories a strong sense that the nature is indifferent to human struggle. So here are the famous author of naturalism, influenced by European naturalistics, especially by Emile Zola. At the end of the 19th century, a generation of writers arose in America whose ideas of the working of the universe and whose perception of society's disorder to let them naturalism, a new and a harsher realism. So we have Jack London. So Jack London from 1876 to 1916 was one of the most popular American writer of his time and regarded as one of the greatest novelists or naturalistic novelists of America. He has been in the forefront of move toward naturalistic fictions of realism in America. He has been deeply influenced by Darwin's ideas of constant struggle in nature, the survival of fittest. He also showed his philosophy of naturalism completely in The Call of the Wild. Another famous author is Theodore Dreiser from 1871 to 1945 was one of the most outstanding American writer of naturalism. He was the leading figure in the national literary movement that replaced the observance of Victorian notion of propriety with the unflinching presentation of real-life subject matter. Among other themes, his novel explored a new social problem and had arisen in rapidly industrializing American. Sinclair Lewis said in his Nobel Prize lecture of 1930 that Dreiser's great first novel, Sister Carrie, which he dared to publish 30 years long ago and which I read 25 years ago, came to houseband and earliest America like a greater free western wind and to our stuffy domesticity give us the first fresh air since Mark Twain and Whitman. So another famous author is Hemingway. Hemingway, 1899 to 1961, was also one of the outstanding American writer with naturalistic tendency. He was known as the Gertrude Stein he called a lost generation. His work had sometimes been read as an essentially negative contemporary commentary on modern world filled with sterility, inevitable failure, and death, which is just the view of naturalism. His primary concern was an individual's movement of truth and his fascination with the threat of physical emotion or psychic death is reflected in his lifelong preoccupation with stories of war, a free will to arm, and for whom the bell tolls. Hemingway's stature as a writer was confirmed with the publication of Free Will to Arm, which portrayed a free will both to war and to love. Hemingway had rejected the romantic ideals of the ultimate unity of lovers, suggesting instead that all relationship must end in death. The Old Man and the Sea centered upon Santiago and aging Cuban freshman who struggled with a giant marlin and shark far out in the Gulf Stream. He ended up with the defeat that the shark ate the giant marlin, which he pulled onto his skiff side and stable with all his strength. From portraying Santiago's image, the novel embodies obviously environmental determinism. Human beings can react toward the exterior, but they are helpless before the force. Men and women are overwhelmed by the force of nature. Yet Hemingway's man's great achievement is to show grace under pressure. There is no another American influence the American people more than Ernest Hemingway. So the inside of Hemingway's book is the spirit of the whole nation rather. He has great influence on his fellow authors such as J.D. Salinger, Hunter S. Thompson, Elmore Leonard, and others. So that will be all for my report about naturalism. Thank you for listening.